It's the Get Published radio show with your host, Gerald Everett Jones, the guy who has all the answers because, well, he's already made all the mistakes himself. And here he is with today's co-host, Cheyenne.
My writing coach said my story was a situation and not a story. What's the difference?
Okay, independent writers of Southern California, this is what we said. When you have a body of fact, when you've done your research, you've really got to get to a point where you say, what is the story here? And you can think about, all right, what's the relevance to today? You can think about what is it that resonates in my soul. But you also have to have the basic craft, writing 101, what is a story? Here's this guy who I'm not particularly fond of in some ways. Any man's life is truly a novel. Well, yeah, women actually make pretty good stories too. Yeah, right, be that as it may. Well, Hemingway, he's a little bit whacked out. Okay, this is an example of what Hemingway gave as a story. Here's a situation. For sale, baby shoes. Okay, so what? If you add 2 words, this becomes the world's shortest novel. Never worn. Baby shoes, never worn. That's a story. And so never worn becomes what I would call the engine of the story. It's what takes that situation, puts it on the track, and gives it momentum. So this is coming back to news value, isn't it?
It is. I think really the key distinction here is that a situation lacks a plot. Situation is just, here's what it is. It needs to be built upon. Something needs to be set up to be resolved or unresolved, or made a mess of. It's like saying Hamlet is about a prince in Denmark.
It lacks an engine of conflict.
Exactly.
And so when his father's ghost shows up and implies that he's not only is he unhappy, but that there are plots afoot, there are difficulties strewn across his path in the future, warns him that you'd better watch out for this. You're lighting a fuse, you're setting up an expectation, but then also that plot is going to play out. Yeah, I think that's true.
Right, it needs to have deeper meaning, some kind of substance. There's actually a great book that a lot of writers I've seen use as a tool to kind of find the distinction between setting up a situation and having a complete story, because I think that's a pretty fairly common problem for a lot of writers.
Yes, I would agree.
There's a book called The Situation and the Story by Vivian Gornick. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
No, not that one.
There's a great quote from it that says, "The situation is the context or circumstance, sometimes the plot. The story is the emotional experience that preoccupies the writer, the insight, the wisdom, the thing one has come to say."
Well, there's a book called The Art of Dramatic Writing, which was actually addressed to playwrights, and in the early part of the 20th century, Lajos Egri wrote that, based on Aristotle, based on the principles of Aristotle. Mm-hmm. But it was basically talking about conflict and talking about how conflict becomes the engine of. And conflict can be not just fisticuffs or gunplay, but also disagreements. And in fact, in most dramatic writing, it really comes down to disagreements, arguments, debates.
Yeah, I think very rarely it's a physical.
Well, in the movies, it's too often a weapon gets picked up to resolve a conflict, mm-hmm. And that's probably a cultural problem that would deserve an entire show. And certainly among computer game generation, as it were, probably we're too prone to. I mean, if you look at the number of billboards, even for a comedy, it's very common to see a protagonist holding a weapon.
That's true.
And that's kind of sad, I think. The number of tickets sold kind of argues for that type of treatment. Is, what's dramatic? Well, life and death. Raise the stakes.
Yeah, and I think in theater and literature, it's still that way for the most part. It's more of a intellectual disagreement or some sort of dramatic situation, not necessarily involving violence. I definitely agree. You see that more in cinema nowadays, for sure. And that's just, it's a lot of different things that have played into that. But we like our guns. We're America. We're obsessed. This question says, what about the old advice that movie scripts and novels shouldn't send messages?
Okay, in this case, again, we're speaking to the independent writers of Southern California.
I will conclude with an example I highly recommend, even though it's not the easiest read in the world, but it's not a long book. Stendhal's The Red and the Black, French novel from 1830. One of the things that's really significant about this is it is called, even though I know if it's true, it is referred to as the first
psychological novel. That's because it's the first novel in the Western tradition where the characters talk to themselves. So internal monologue. All the stuff that Tony Bill said you couldn't do in a movie. Now everybody's doing it in a movie because movies are more like novels. We want to know what's going on in the character's head. Orange is the New Black, we want to know why. So, first psychological novel, very interesting from that standpoint. But the other thing also, very important for you as writers of historical fiction, or as readers of historical fiction, is Stendhal says, buried in that book, that people who lived in Paris at the time, sophisticated people who read novels, were wiser than the people in the country. Why would he say that? The people in the country didn't read novels, and so all they really had was their Sunday school lessons or the Bible. There are moral tales there. There are moral tales that say if you cheat on your wife, this is what will happen. But in Paris, there's Balzac novels where if you cheat on your wife, this is what will happen. Well, this might happen. Okay, I've seen now, because I've read novels, I've seen consequences. Moral consequences of actions is, that might feel good at the time, but that could be a really bad idea. Okay, now that doesn't mean the people in Paris are any more moral because they just find cleverer ways of cheating on their wives. But Stendhal is making the statement that literature informs our lives. And again, it's because, those forgotten stories, they're there in your subconscious. You can't divorce yourself from the fact that you're a creature of Western civilization. You're a creature of all those writers who went before. And if you're going to write a historical novel, you're going to contribute to that body of work. 10 people read you, 100 people read you. Somebody 100 years after you're dead, their behavior may be changed by what you do.
Cheyenne, this is one of the things that irks me. In the publishing world, especially in Hollywood, we use the word entertainment to classify the industry. And it always seems to me to fall short of what literature is all about.
I would agree. It's so much more than entertainment, something to occupy your time. For most people, I would say, you're, whether it's intentional or not, receiving some kind of message from books or movies or, a little 1-minute video you see on the internet. There's something that you take from that you internalize. And it can be good, it can be bad.
Well, do you think an audience seeks that, or just something that they happen to acquire because they were looking for entertainment?
I think it depends. I think some people go out with the intention of finding some kind of specific knowledge or gaining something. Like, for example, self-help books. You're seeking that out because you want to get advice or some kind of insight into a situation that you're going through. But then it can go the opposite direction too. You can end up going to see a movie to kind of fill time, like I said, occupy yourself, and you might end up walking away from it thinking about personal situation differently. So I think it goes both ways. People seek it out and people kind of get it subconsciously as well.
We'll be back after this short break.
Get published is all about helping you. You get published. And these days, the way to go is self-publishing, where there are no agents or editors or big publishing houses telling you can't, or making you feel like you're not good enough. Going back in history, many famous authors were self-publishers. With his own printing press, Benjamin Franklin published Poor Richard's Almanac in 1732, long before he was a famous statesman. That's how we know Ben's sayings, such as, "Fish and visitors smell in 3 days." Seriously, if you want to change your life or change the world or both, it's a great time to get in the game. Ebooks are particularly easy. With a click, you can reach a worldwide audience. Did you know that there are more people in China who read English than those of us who use the language in all the rest of the world? So if you've got a story to tell, write that memoir or that novel that's been percolating in your head. And if you're an established professional, or if you have a job you dislike or no job at all, give us that business or technical or even political book that establishes you as an expert who deserves serious attention. Yes, it's easy to get published, but understand you'll need help if you want professional results. Editors and copy editors help you clean up your prose. Book designers make the product eye-catching. And publicists help you be heard above all that social media noise. We have those support resources on our website, getpublishedradio.com. And there we've also got a request for services form, where you can get personal attention for whatever might be keeping you from getting it done.
That's why we say getpublishedradio.com is your doorway to unlimited self-expression. Hey, it's all about the First Amendment. Use it or lose it.
Welcome back. We're rejoining Gerald and Cheyenne now as they continue their discussion of Q&A crazy.
So next question we have is, I'm told posting a video on social media can get a lot of attention, but I'm not technical and I don't want to spend a lot of money. Any tips?
Okay, this was for also Publishers Association Los Angeles, and the seminar was on using video to promote your books. Let's see how that went.
We're across from Sony Studio. We're surrounded by film school grads. They all want to produce video for you. Don't necessarily take the first $6,000 bid you get to produce your video. I'm going to show you stuff tonight for $1.95. You can do a lot of very interesting stuff. The thing to remember about what I just showed you with this login kind of thing is, no, I'm not going to do 5 minutes live on Facebook. I'm going to do, hi, I'm here in Culver City. I'm talking to Paula. Tomorrow morning, I'm actually going to post an article that I wrote about this particular topic. End of video, okay? But I've teased it. I've created news value. The difference between cinema style and what I would call news style. News style is run and gun, point and shoot, use every automatic control on the camera because you're filming a robbery, you just ran into Steve Martin on the street, and here's my friend Steve. Okay, you don't have time to play with any of that 3-point lighting and all the other stuff that they teach you in film school. It's the news value that's really important. The only thing that's common between those two things are the audio is crucial no matter what. Even if there's high news value, no one is going to excuse sucky audio. Okay, so here's an example of what I might call scripted. This is what I have on Create Space. I think the basic distinction is scripted and unscripted. I mean, certainly if you have something that you would consider to be a commercial or a seminar, whether you're going to sell it or use it for promotional purposes, something that would be quote-unquote canned, then you have an opportunity to use more studio quality type approaches, even if you're shooting outside. You want 3-point lighting, you want key light, fill light, backlight. That's filmmaking 101, okay? And presumably you may be employing professionals to help you with that. Run and gun is all about get it while it happens, and don't be shy. And I would say don't be shy about starting out in a video, even if you feel as though that's all you can produce or offer. Try to have your content have some kind of timeliness and relevance. Those are the two guidelines. Like I said, if I run into Steve Martin on the street, I want to throw my arms around him and hold him to cover my book and try to log in from that place. It's an event, it's news, it's here, it's gone, okay? And I might reuse that at some point, but if it's a presentation, okay, whether that be a commercial, a lecture, a seminar, or an author interview. But what I would stress, and this is something we're all tempted to do, is here I am, here's my book. So what? Okay. There should be some kind of hook. On Bonfire of the Vanderbilts, the most success that I had with a press release when I was talking about not only the 100-year rumor that it was based on, but the fact that the Vanderbilts were the 1% of yesteryear. Well, suddenly, we're all worried about the 1%. You won't find the Vanderbilts in the Forbes 100 these days. There's a university named after them, but they ain't rich, most of them. So what happened?
So right off the bat, your first point, outsource to college students. That's exactly what I would tell someone if they said, how can I get a cheap video? College kids, they're raw talent, they're knowledgeable, and they're cheap.
And they're usually well trained. But one of the things that I was trying to say, though, is that you get a film school graduate, and they often want to use their cinematography, technical, whatever, and spontaneity and news value are going to be a whole lot more important than the technical aspects of whatever it is they shoot.
I think that's why you stay away from the film grads. You go to the journalism students. Coming from a journalism background, I can tell you we understand news value. We understand, especially if you're trying to go viral, most viral videos are not high production value, artsy things. They're, like you said, spontaneous. They happen in the moment. It's something just you happen to catch, even on a cell phone. It doesn't need to be a real camera, anything like that. It's just, it goes viral because the content is important.
It's not just, and this is probably something that we can't just
emphasize enough is if the primary message is look at me, then you're probably not pushing something out there that people are going to care to look at, and certainly not that they're going to care to share.
Yeah.
So what they want to share in news value, journalism, absolutely, I think those things go together. Okay, what else you got?
All right, next question is short and sweet. What about doing author video interviews?
Again, just to emphasize, statistically, how-to videos have been the largest single category in terms of popularity on YouTube when you're excluding, commercial movies. Author interview. Now, the other thing is there are outfits that will charge you to create author interview. You've probably seen them. They'll do it, professionally, whatever. They charge you an arm and a leg. I kind of put that under the category of here I am, look at me, here's my book. The people who are interviewing you, and I speak this immodestly as a radio host, but they don't necessarily know how to ask penetrating or relevant questions. It's like, well, what motivated you to write this book? Now, actually, I've asked that question before, but I thought it was relevant at the time. You want to think of what's that hook? What's behind that interview? What is it about that you're going to use to drive people to it? So it's like a Hollywood pitch, it's like a concept, but think a lot about that and think twice about it and sleep on it before you decide to do a made-up interview. Not that they're bad.
I would think, we've said this before, that author interviews in and of themselves, here I am, look at me, may not have a lot of appeal. I was thinking just the other day about Charlie Rose and what is it, he does author interviews. How are his different from anybody else's? And I think it just has to do with the fact that he drills deeper into the subject matter. If he hasn't read the book, at least he's got some pretty good coverage in front of him. He understands whatever the subjects are at a fairly deep level, and he challenges that person. He challenges that author to maybe spill their guts in a way that maybe they might not before.
Yeah, a good author interview really depends on the interviewer. A lot of it is left up to them to ask the right questions to really get the audience interested, because in general, I feel like author interviews can get kind of boring, monotonous. They're asking the same questions they ask everyone. And
why did you write this book? How come you got into
exactly.
Why do you like mysteries?
Yeah, they're just there to promote, and you can really tell as a viewer when the interview didn't really need to happen, when the interview was paid for. It's just a means of promotion rather than...
It's an infomercial at that point. It's an
and
frankly, there are infomercials that deliver value when they talk about the benefits of the product. Yeah, I would think authors should save their money if they're talking about actually, paying to have an interview produced.
Right. If they're interesting enough, or if their book gets enough of an audience that someone really wants to bring them on and talk more about them, then I think it's great.
We'll be back after this short break.
In all the history of the world, with today's technology, it's never been easier to get published, to self-publish your printed book, ebook, audiobook, even multimedia ebook. And not just novels and memoirs, or how-to books and histories, although if that's what you've got, let's have it. But also poetry, spoken word, graphic novel, cartoons, children's picture book, interactive video, games, virtual reality, and imaginative mashups of all this stuff. Get into the game. Along the way, you'll no doubt need some professional help from an editor, a book designer, a publicist. But isn't the investment in yourself worth it? How about you take the money you'd spend on your next vacation and get famous instead? GetPublishedRadio.com. That's our support website where we've got links to all the resources you'll need. And don't forget that request for services form if you crave some personal attention. That's GetPublishedRadio.com. Hey, it's all about the First Amendment. You can use it or lose it.
Runke Productions, the audio magicians, can take your radio shows, podcasts, audiobooks, and ads from the streets of New York to the outer reaches of the galaxy.
Wow! I think we need more echo at the end of that.
Look, visit us at runkeeproductions.com.
I still think we need more cowbell.
Welcome back. We're rejoining Gerald and Cheyenne now as they continue their discussion of Q&A crazy.
Well, what about the timing with an event? Maybe that has some journalistic value.
Absolutely. If there's some kind of connection between current events, that would absolutely add more value to there being an interview.
Well, certainly on Twitter, you've got that panel on the side that tells you which keywords are trending.
Your hashtags.
Yeah, I guess that can be overused, and perhaps the connection between your post and whatever it is that's trending might be phony or tenuous, but it's certainly something to think about.
Yeah, people definitely overuse the means of promoting by hashtag for sure. They'll just attach whatever's trending to, a picture or a post that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with it. When it's used properly, it's a great way to find that connection to, a picture or a video or someone's prose about something. So it has its uses, but it is definitely abused.
Next question.
All right, our next one says, what's involved in getting picture permissions for my book?
Well, speaking to the independent writers of Southern California, this was this response.
A Google image search, and you click on the image. It will probably tell you the rights holder. Often, especially on Wiki Image, it'll give you their opinion as to whether it's public domain or whether it's restricted domain. As a general rule, if it's in a book, write the publisher, because the Rights and Permissions Department has to keep files on everything that they print in the book. So they'll say, we don't own the rights, Gerald Everett Jones does. Okay, and then here's how to get in touch with him. Or they'll say, we'll handle the request, because they do, as the permissions departments do. Types of permissions: intellectual property right, quoted use of something that is within copyright or an illustration. You not only need to get permission, but you need to get the exact credit line that the copyright holder wants you to use in your caption or in your, in a novel. You don't do it in line in the text. You put it in the back in your, references, or you put it on your copyright page. But the wording of that, here's the catch there. If you don't get permission and then you still credit them, but you don't use the words that they told you to use, they know you didn't get permission. And they'll ask you for a copy. They'll ask you to send a copy as a follow-up. We want to put your book in our research library. Yeah, we also want to make sure that you quoted us the way that we told you, the way that we're allowing it.
So journalism 101, right?
Yes, and this particular question I was really interested in because I'm definitely kind of a legal buff. I enjoy legal processes. So in researching it, I found Stanford University's library's 5 steps to copyright and fair use.
Oh my.
Yeah, and it's a really not simple when you're doing it, but it breaks down the steps in a very understandable way.
What might those steps be?
Well, the first one would be to determine if permission is needed under intellectual property law. Then you would have to identify the owner, which you explained. You can check the copyright notice if you just click on a Google image. Tends to be nowadays owned by a stock photo company. After that, you would need to identify the specific rights needed. So there's several different categories that this would fall under: the right to reproduce, the right to distribute, the right to modify, and then within those you also have the exclusivity, the term, and the territory. So where you're promoting it, how long you can promote it for, are you just allowed to promote it, or can other people promote it? So there's a lot that falls under that. Then you also need to, after you do all your research, contact the owner and negotiate payment. And then finally get your permission agreement in writing so that you have a real binding contract.
I would think there'd be a high degree of seriousness would be images for book covers, for example.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that stunned me was, even when it's a museum, it may actually be in the public domain, but it's actually a photo that's from their archive, whatever. They're charging you to use it. And the thing that really stung me was there's a specific period of time. They're only giving you the rights for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And that's, number one, it's expensive. But number two, you had better have some kind of tracking mechanism where you know that those kinds of rights have to be renewed, because you would want your book to have a shelf life longer than that.
That's exactly right. That's where it gets tricky, and that's where it would fall under your term. There's all kinds of little stipulations that they can put in depending on the kind of picture that you're using. So it's really a complicated thing that you can get into.
A straightforward approach is, if you're prepared to spend money on an image that you want, if it is a commercial service like Corbis or Getty, then you know that you've got a really straightforward agreement. Mm-hmm. And there will be an option to pay more money for worldwide perpetual rights. And it may not look like a bargain, but it might be a good idea to make sure that you have that rather than get involved in.
Definitely. And the only downside I could see to going more kind of mainstream stock photo is usually I would think that those agreements aren't necessarily exclusive. So that could mean that your book cover, if you're using it for your cover, let's say, another book could have that same picture on the cover.
Well, it was interesting. I don't remember where it was. I know I saw a post about book covers that were similar, and it almost seemed like book designers had, in certain genres, especially like romance novels, liberally borrowed concepts from one another, and it was amazing how similar those covers were.
And I think that's where it's really important to have either a good lawyer or a good understanding of kind of the legalese used in your contracts when it comes to images. Because
also, in terms of marketing and distinction between your brand, if your book is going to be a unique brand, then I think you want an image that people don't see every day.
So you have to make sure you're protected there.
And that's our show. Get Published is all about self-publishing and self-expression, and that getting published and the ease of getting published these days is really all about exercising the First Amendment in this free society of ours. What we need these days are more ideas. Even though we're deluged with information, we need more good ideas. And we need debate about those ideas. Book-length debate, not just snippets that are posted on social media, not just selfies and cute pictures of your pets, the things that you really think. And remember, because in self-publishing there are no gatekeepers out there, that is the good news and that is the bad news. So hire some good help. Perhaps you found that here. You may find it on the website, whatever you're looking for, whether it's an editor or a book designer or somebody to help you promote. But hire good help, get good advice, and by all means, please get published.
The Get Published radio show with Gerald Everett Jones is produced by Runkey Productions. Our producer is Lori Marple and your announcer is Bill Navarro. Music by Jason Shaw. You'll find links to support services on our website, getpublishеdradio.com. So whether you're an author, a publisher, or a self-promoter, get help at getpublishedradio.com. And thanks for listening.